You're locked in to the Grain Market Talk podcast. Fast updates, market movers, and the grain news you need right now. Trading commodity futures and options involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors.
This year's crop tour is sponsored by Green Key Ag, a plant nutrition company that takes your fields to their max potential. Please contact Noah at 712-441-5446. All right, today we've got August 5th. We're going to talk about another day of the crop tour, day 3, with Jaden Houselog here. How's it going, Jaden?
It's going good, Mike. I'm on the crop tour, so can't complain.
Yes, it's always a fun time. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about just the market up front here, talk about the route you did yesterday, give an Ohio yield estimate, and then talk about the StoneX survey that came out last night as well. So, December corn, Cade, you want to pull that chart up? We've got some interesting action going on. We continue to find support in the high 450s. Their longer-term support would be very close to 449, 450. So I'm curious if we do dip down there before we've got the WASDE report that comes out next Wednesday at 11 o'clock. So I'm looking forward to that survey. And it's going to be interesting because NAS, that's their first WASDE report they do of the year. So we typically see some massive changes through the WASDE report in that report. And with this sell-off right about 50% here, I'm curious if we'll get a little bit closer to that 450 type area, something a little closer to that 60% retracement or so. But this weakness here definitely stemming from we've had some weather issues that have all of a sudden found some rainfall. We've found a wet forecast, a little bit cooler this week, for example. The wars really aren't producing much traction for any bullish activity there. The winter wheat and Chicago wheat and spring wheat have all been held back as well lately. They've struggled to find traction and push this market higher than we were at the end of middle of July there. So a few things. China buying's been significant. They continue to peck along. Nothing substantial or any major breaking news there, but they are about 15 or 14% of their total target, I believe, there as we're approaching that first meeting supposedly taking place with Xi and Trump. So I want to talk about the route a little bit yesterday that you took there, Jaden, through Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and back to Indiana. So take it away.
Yeah, Mike. So started there in central Illinois. And things we saw in Illinois, pretty interesting looking crop there. So overall conditions, if you just look from the road, look pretty good, really good. Everything's dark green, the lawns including. A lot different locally than where our office is there in Laverne, Minnesota. So, looking at some of the samples like you have there, Cade pulled up, some of the maturity levels kind of all over the board there. So that first stop in, more of the western part of Illinois, pretty close with Iowa, pretty close with last year's yield estimate. So had that county around the 200, 220 yield. But as we moved farther east, maturity ranged all over the board. So we even pulled some samples. It was even hard to, guess a yield on. Saw a lot of drown out spots, but the spots that were still standing looked really good. So the question is for Illinois, I think you're going forward is, are those drown out spots going to really put a damper on this yield, or the higher spots make up for that? And kind of saw the same thing in Indiana, Ohio as well. Everything looked dark green, lawns including. Soybeans looked really good. That was one thing we really noticed as well. But our customer stops in Indiana, Ohio, they were still pretty hopeful on their crop. We made a stop there, but northwest Ohio there by Lepic. And the customer there, came off a pretty good year last year. And, despite some of the planting delays, he's really hopeful in his crop this year. So, not a lot of drought there. They did just catch a recent rain, and some of the samples we pulled were showing around that 220 yield level. So overall, pretty optimistic out east. It's just whether this, too much rain here early on is really going to put a damper on this crop.
Not too much talk about, they were planting into late May there, right? So did they seem too concerned about that and crop getting rushed along too quick or anything like that?
It's kind of funny. We did have that conversation with our Ohio customer out there, and he was saying, some of his later planted corn does better some years, so he wasn't too concerned about it. But I mean, yeah, I would say Western Corn Belt, we're about 2 weeks ahead of these guys out east here on the maturity level, so it'll be interesting to see how it comes along here going forward. But you could maybe make the argument a rain here going out east is going to be more beneficial rather than out west as this crop's further behind out here.
Awesome. We're going to give an Ohio yield estimate. So I just wanted you to break down how we're sitting on that, I guess, first the last couple of years. So any big takes on the Ohio yield estimate?
Yeah, so Ohio, I think we're going to stick around a 188 yield. So just for reference, last year they're around a 185, records a 198. So yeah, talking with farmers, they're still pretty optimistic. There was, some planting delays, but it seems like they have that every year out east here. They get pretty wet pretty fast. So I still think it's going to be better than last year based off the samples pulled and the conditions we saw. But it'll just be interesting to see what the drown out spots are going to have for an impact on first state yield for Ohio.
Yeah, 23 Ohio really blew it out of the water with that 198 yield that they had there. That was a pretty good outlier. But yeah, last year 185, so maybe just slightly above that it looks like. And as we get into the StoneX estimates, this is always a fun day. This always comes out during our crop year most years. It's always fun to kind of compare halfway through and see how we're sitting apples to apples. And a few of the standouts, so they're at a 184.8 in the survey. We were Professional Ag Marketing. We were in this survey as well for whatever it's worth. 184.4 on the yield on corn, 53 on soybeans. So very barely above trend line. I mean, a few of the states that really stick out. 218 out of Iowa looks great there. So I'll be surprised if we are lower. It shouldn't be much less. But Iowa, for what it's worth, 211 was their yield prior for a record, so pretty high. South Dakota and Nebraska seem a little high. We'll see how that goes, especially with North Dakota up there too. They're struggling. Minnesota looks great so far from what we see at home here, and going out east, Illinois at 212 there, Jaden. That'd be 5 off a record. Last year, they're about 214, so just barely below last year. They've got some problems there, as you've been finding. But Indiana, 203, Ohio, 187. So very close to your Ohio estimate there to compare. But overall, the number at 184.8. What are your thoughts about that number just being out on the crop tour, Jaden?
Yeah, so far from what we've seen, I question some of the Western estimates there, the Nebraska 190, and like you said, the South Dakota, North Dakota, but you'll be hitting those routes here tomorrow. But I'm really skeptical of those yields out west, that's for sure.
Very much so. It'll be hard to not cherry pick some of the problem makers in the Western Corn Belt. This was a survey done by StoneX, as it always is, so they don't have a lot to do with the numbers, just collecting it. But nonetheless, pretty nice yield, just barely above trend line there for their numbers. On the balance sheet, you start talk about it. That's probably going to get you over an 11% stocks to use ratio pretty comfortably, at least. So, with that being the case, you're probably still not quite 12%, but historically, that's 4 to 475 corn, pretty much mid fours. So, that'd be a little bit of an estimate there, just given what we've seen. So pretty good demand this year on the corn crop, and we've been using a lot of it. Great exports. Ethanol usage has been fantastic, so no real complaints there. Any other final thoughts after your last day on the crop tour here?
No, we'll just keep chugging along. We'll let everyone know what we think here on Friday on our national yield estimate. I think it is worth noting that StoneX estimate. The USDA, the August number they come out with, some of that is, derived from surveys too. So StoneX normally has a pretty high correlation to the August yield there as well. So don't be surprised if you see a high number here next week.
Same with the NDVI satellite imagery. A lot of that 186 to 187 area on those. So I won't be surprised if next Wednesday we come out with a pretty high yield in that August WASDE report, kind of like we had last year. So we'll give that a shot next Wednesday at 11. Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, your next stops here on the crop tour. So I'm looking forward to following you there. Thursday is your last day of the crop tour. I'll be doing a few stops here in Minnesota and South Dakota coming up for the Northern Crop Tour just for tomorrow. So we'll keep you posted on those results. Otherwise, please click the link on the description below. Go to our website, click subscribe. You can find some really cool stuff. Cade's got popped up there, 26 Crop Tour blog, where you can find the route, plug in your own yield estimates, calculators. You can plug with the states as well. So you get to play around with the same things we do and kind of see what Jaden and the team are finding out and about, along with our aerial crop tour we took about a month or so ago as well. So if you have any questions, please reach out, send us some samples, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.